Hi, today we're going to make pita bread. To do that, we're going to combine flour, yeast, we're going to add some sugar so the yeast has some food, ice water, olive oil, and salt. So to start with, I'm going to mix 2.5 cups flour with 2 teaspoons of yeast and 1 tablespoon of sugar, and whisk that together. Into that, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of olive oil. You could also use vegetable oil. And then 1.5 cups of ice water. But not the ice. Then with a wooden spoon, I'm going to mix that around until it forms a dough. At this point, the only thing we haven't added is the salt. And the reason we haven't added the salt is salt inhibits yeast growth. So we want the yeast to really start working. And what the yeast is going to do is eat the sugar, respirate, and make carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide is going to create all the bubbles that will cause our dough to rise. Once you've mixed that together well, go ahead and let it sit for about 10 minutes. Okay, your dough is rested for 10 minutes. That's given the yeast time to activate. And I realized in the last step that maybe your dough isn't the right consistency or it looks more like batter. You can always adjust that consistency by adding a little extra flour during this 10 minutes. I'm pretty happy with where mine's at, but I can always add more flour in if it isn't coming together the way I want. And at this point, I'm going to add I think 1.25 teaspoons of salt. And once that's in, I'm going to continue to stir this around until the dough incorporates the salt and it really starts coming together. This is where if you have a mixer or a stand mixer, that's great, but I don't, and I realize a lot of other people don't, so I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way with a wooden spoon. So for a few minutes here, stir it around best you can, and eventually it'll start sticking together. And this time, we're going to work with it on an oiled cutting board. If you're happy with where your dough is, I'm looking at it thinking, I'm going to throw a little more flour in. But we want the dough to be oiled while it rises overnight. So we're not going to flour the cutting board, we're going to oil the cutting board. There we go. And to do that, I'm just going to add a little bit of vegetable oil. Be careful with this step. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and move that around with your hand or use a spatula. Obviously, if you have a plastic cutting board, it'll be easier to clean up than a wood one. There we go. Flip your dough over so it gets coated. And we're going to make 8 pitas. So cut your dough into 8 portions. Then, once you have those 8 portions, you're going to form each of these into a dough ball that we're going to put into a container And like I said earlier, it's going to sit overnight. So to do this, kind of pinch from the sides back to the middle. And eventually twist that off. And then, let's see. I'm going to coat this with a little bit of oil as well so they don't stick too much. Just like on your cutting board, spread that around so that nothing sticks. There we go. This step of how you form the dough into a dough ball is extremely important. Tomorrow, when we cook the pitas, they won't puff up if you don't have the right airspace in there. The reason they puff up is from the steam that's being created inside. And if you fold the sides over into a tight dough ball and pinch that off, it'll be folded properly. So tomorrow, all we have to do is roll it out, cook it, and it'll puff up and you'll have that nice pocket inside. Just like the last one, twist that off and flop that down. There we go. Once all of those are in a container, you could just put them on a plate and cover them with plastic wrap, put them in a bowl, cover it. I'm just putting them in this plastic container that has a lid that seals. It's been 24 hours and the pita dough has risen overnight. Now looking at it here, it looks like I might have added a little too much water. But I'm going to do my best to go forward with this. And what I need to do is take each of these dough balls out, even though some of them have kind of morphed together. I'm still going to pull them out, flour them, roll them out, and then we're going to cook them. So with clean hands, do your very best to get it out. And then once you get it out, try to have it keep its shape and drop it right into a bowl of flour. Flip it around to make sure it's coated on each side, and then lay it down flat on a cutting board and roll it out until it's about 6 to 8 inches across, about the size of what you'd expect a piece of pita bread to be. Put it on a cookie sheet, and then once they're all rolled out, we'll cook them. As you're rolling out your pitas, you want to preheat your oven to 425 or 450 degrees, and then think about what you're going to want to cook them on. If you have a pizza stone or a baking stone or steel, you can heat that up in the oven to cook them on. If you don't have one of those, you could use a cast iron skillet, preferably flipped upside down, or you could use a cookie sheet flipped upside down. I'm going to cook mine outside on an outdoor pizza oven, one of the small propane ones you can get at Home Depot, because I find it a little bit easier, but you can make these just as easily in your home oven. When it's time to bake your pitas, there's a few options in how to do it. The first is if you have a pizza stone. Put the pizza stone in the oven, heat it up to 425, 450, and put it on a lower rack so you have room to move it around. If you don't have a pizza stone, there's a few other things you could use. One would be just a cookie sheet, but flip it upside down and heat that up. Beware that when you heat a cookie sheet, sometimes it'll warp a little, but it should still heat up and cook your pita just fine. If you do have a cast iron skillet, I recommend using it instead because it's a little bit heavier and it'll get hotter than the cookie sheet. You're probably better off if you flip your cast iron skillet upside down because then you have this nice flat area to move the pita around and get it off. Of course, that's only big enough to cook one at a time. If you have 2 cast iron skillets, you can put 2 in there and cook 2 at a time. Whichever way you choose, good luck, and remember to cook them about 1 to 3 minutes on each side. You'll know it's done on the second side when it puffs up, but if you've gone to 3 minutes, take it out anyways. Sometimes when you fold them, It's not perfect, and it doesn't puff up with air. That doesn't mean it's ruined. It's still going to taste delicious. It just won't have the pocket in it. Okay, I'm out at my small propane pizza oven. I've already heated it up, and the thermometer says it's about 500 degrees. So I'm going to put the first pita in. If you're a little more talented than me, you can probably cook 2 at a time. And then once that's in, you want to keep your eye on it. And it should cook for about 1 to 3 minutes per side. Once it's cooked for about 1 to 3 minutes on the first side, take it out, flip it over, and cook it on the opposite side. I like to put the peel here so I don't accidentally drop it on the ground. You'll know your pita's done when it puffs up with air, like that. If it's not puffing up with air completely, you can always flip it over and give it a little more time on the opposite side.